Now on ABC Family presents a new series, Ping Pong!
Now I'm your host, Ching Chong, and these are our contestants, Ryan and Justin. Today we will have a special episode covering political reforms and limits to Deng Xiaoping's leadership in China. Okay, and the rules for this game show are, if you get your question correct, you will get one step closer to receiving your prize, and if you are incorrect, you don't know what will happen. Who was Deng Xiaoping, and when did he take leadership?
Deng Xiaoping was a pragmatist, while the other leaders were military leaders, and he took leadership in 1978.
Correct. What were the four modernizations?
They were the agriculture, national defense, science and technology, and modernization of industry.
Correct. What was Tiananmen Square, and when did it occur?
The Tiananmen Square incident occurred in 1989 in Tiananmen Square, and it was a group of student demonstrators protesting their lack of access to education and other inequalities.
Correct.
Unfortunately, our contestant Ryan has been killed by a bus, and the show has been canceled.
Hello, and welcome to today's history lesson. The historian will be Mr. Chester Burlington.
Oh, hello there. I'm Chester Burlington, a professor at University of Alabama, and today I'll be talking to you about the political changes and limitations to these changes with Deng Xiaoping.
Who was Deng Xiaoping?
Deng Xiaoping was a pragmatist. He criticized the cult of personality of Mao Zedong. Deng encouraged the Politburo and the Central Committee to change so that they could consist mostly of young, college-educated men and women. His focus on economic growth was through the four modernizations, which included agriculture, industry, national defense, and science and technology, which were to be improved through a series of slow experimentation. Because 80% of the population was in agriculture, it had to be focused on by Deng Xiaoping. His agricultural reform allowed state-mandated land to be rented to farmers, and required smaller quantities of produce to be provided to the... They were going through a time of relative freedom. Parts of the relative freedom included the Democracy Wall in 1978. The Democracy Wall became a place where people took up the government's movement to express their opinion, and it allowed them to get a different education from the one that they had received during the Cultural Revolution. In addition to the democracy movements, there was improved relationships with the Soviets, as seen as in the signing of the Cultural Exchange Agreement in 1988. This allowed a reduction in economic sanctions. It also provided less dependence on the Soviets and instead increased the influence in Siberia. In addition, Japan wanted to increase the infrastructure of China so that they could later become trade partners, as well as the United States, who increased their investments. China also implemented one of the strictest birth control policies in all of the world in 1979, where they got it down to 1.17% population growth. Unfortunately, this concludes the time that I have on this matter. Till next time.
Is this thing on? Howdy, my name is Hunter, hunter-gatherer, and I'd like to talk a little bit on this subject. Even though Deng opened up the economy, he still took too much control of the people's lives. Due to the controllingness of the lives of the people, many rallies started to form in favor of social changes, and they would form in both Shanghai and they would also form in Beijing after Mao's death in 1989. There was strikes, there was crime, there was corruption, there was an overall discontent feeling over the limits in religious practices, as well as a lack of equality in the access of education and work. The rallies led to demonstrations in front of Tiananmen Square, and the demonstrations led to hunger strikes. Martial law was announced, but it was not carried out. The PLA did not want to include violence in these, demonstrations. And good old Gorbachev, he came to China during the demonstrations, but Deng Xiaoping felt very embarrassed after, letting good old Gorbachev see what was going on. So, he called out for the tanks to come and for, the justice to be, pursued. See, Deng Xiaoping even started off in a rough spot in 1978. He came in with massive poverty. He came in with a huge national debt. And then on top of that, there was just a high unemployment. Deng Xiaoping was also at a disadvantage because with all the new economic laws that were, he was trying to enforce, he didn't have the right lawyers. None of them were trained. Very poor human capital. None of them were trained to actually implement the laws he was creating. Yep. And since there was a low human capital in the country, the country began to draw foreigners to come in and work in the industries. But many of the people did not agree with this because they believed that having all these new foreigners in the country, it was a form of a spiritual contamination. And since the country was in such a high national debt, they had no way to modernize their industries. And since these industries were so insufficient, there was many negative externalities that were coming about, such as pollution, stuff like that, and that became a big problem. And so, in conclusion,
Hey, you're not supposed to be in here.
I gotta go.
His focus was on the full modernizations, which included
Go. Oh.
Because the population was 80% focused on agriculture, agricultural reform was especially important. China also implemented one of the most strict birth control.
Stop it.
Unfortunately, Unfortunately, our contestant Ryan has been killed by a bus. Unfortunately, our contestant Ryan has been killed by a bus. And the show will be canceled.
Yellow.